Blameless, one word dropped into the middle of the darkest chapter in the Bible. The whole earth has rotted through. Heaven is days away from drowning it. And in the wreckage of that world stands a single sentence. Genesis 6:9, Noah was a righteous man, blameless in his generations. For centuries, this has been read as a character reference. Noah was a good man surrounded by bad ones. But look at the strange word hiding at the end of it. Not blameless in his generation. Blameless in his generations. Plural. As if the verdict were never about the man standing there at all, but about something running through him. Something older than Noah, stretching out behind him, carried in his blood. What if blameless was never a grade for how he behaved? What if it was a description of what flowed in his veins, the one bloodline left on earth that the Watchers had not yet touched? This is not the story of a good man in a bad time. It is the story of a single thread of light, holding by one strand over a world that had gone completely dark. To feel how rare that thread was, you first have to feel how total the darkness had become. Genesis 6:5 does not say that most people had turned wicked. It says every imagination of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. Sit inside those words, not often evil, not usually. Every thought, only evil, without stopping. 3 walls slam shut at once, every only continually, and the verse leaves no crack in them where a better impulse might get through. This is not a society with problems. This is a species whose inner life has been hollowed out and refilled with one thing. Picture walking through a city in those final years. Every face you pass carries the same hunger behind the eyes. There is no neighbor you could trust, no elder who remembers a cleaner age, no child being raised toward anything but appetite. The cruelty isn't hidden in back rooms. It is the open culture, the thing everyone admires. That is the world Genesis is describing, not a handful of bad men, a planet with the lights switched off. And it had gone deeper than behavior. Genesis 6:11 and 12 pull the lens back. The earth was corrupt before God, and the earth was filled with violence, for all flesh had corrupted its way upon the earth. Read that last phrase again, not all people, all flesh. The rot had pushed past what men did and into what men were. It was no longer only a sickness of choices, it was in the meat of creation itself, in the bloodlines, in the species. This is where the older texts turn a moral tragedy into something closer to a horror story. The violence that filled the earth was not entirely homegrown. The Book of Enoch describes 200 watchers descending, towering, broad-shouldered male figures robed in light, coming down onto the mountain to take human women and to teach mankind the arts of war and blood. Their children were the Nephilim, the giants, and with every union, the corruption spread one more bloodline deep. House by house, line by line, the human stock being overwritten from the inside. The darkness in Genesis 6 was not only sin. It was contamination. Something that was not human was getting into the blood of the world. Now go back to that strange plural, blameless in his generations. Once you understand what was happening to the bloodlines, that plural stops being a compliment and becomes almost a medical fact. It is not a claim that Noah behaved well in his own lifetime. It means the line behind him had stayed clean. His father, his father's father, all the way back. From Adam down to Noah was 10 generations, 10 links in a single chain. And here is what should stop you cold. Every one of those 10 links was a place the corruption could have entered. 10 thresholds the darkness could have crossed. 10 chances for one watcher, one union, one drop of that altered blood to get in and end the line forever. And it never did. Not once in 10 generations, and the Bible quietly tells you which thread it was. 2 family lines run out of the opening chapters of Genesis side by side. One descends from Cain, the first murderer, and Genesis follows it straight into the world's first city. Its first forged weapons of bronze and iron, its first proud boast of vengeance. The other descends from Seth, the son born to replace the murdered Abel, the line of whom Genesis says men began to call upon the name of the Lord. 2 threads leaving the same garden, walking opposite directions, one down into violence and invention, the other holding to something quieter. Noah came from the second, His generations were the line that had spent 10 lifetimes refusing to be pulled across into the dark. And consider how long that refusal lasted. The genealogy from Adam to the flood spans more than 1,600 years, 10 lifetimes stacked end to end, each one longer than ours by centuries. That is a greater stretch of time than separates the fall of the Roman Empire from the device you are hearing this on. For more than 1,500 years, in a world sliding deeper into corruption with every passing century, one line kept its blood clean. Not for a generation, not for a single golden age. For 16 centuries, while everything around it was being overwritten. Picture that line not as names on a page, but as one thread of light running down through a tangled mass of darkness. A single bright strand passing through 10 hands, while all around it the other threads blacken and fray and are pulled under. Every other line on earth had been touched. This one had not. By the time of Noah, it was the last clean strand left in the entire weave. The older texts say exactly this, in their own words. The Book of Jubilees, retelling this same age, comes to the moment of the flood and lands on one devastating sentence. Jubilees 5:19, Noah alone found grace in the eyes of the Lord, alone. Of every living soul on the planet, every city, every nation, every family, the grace of God found a single place to land in one man because his was the only blood it could still recognize. And the Book of Jasher, describing the same generation in chapter 5, repeats the verdict on everyone else. All flesh had corrupted its way upon the earth. Two ancient texts standing outside the Bible, circling the very same impossible fact. The whole world had been altered, and one thread had not. It is easy to hear the word chosen and imagine something enviable. Stop and ask what it actually cost to be that one thread. Noah was not an angel. He was mortal, human, aging, a man who bled and grieved and grew tired like anyone else, set apart from the shining beings on the mountain only by what ran quiet in his veins. And that inheritance did not make his life easier. It made him the loneliest man who has ever lived. Imagine waking each morning as the only household on earth still praying to a God everyone else had forgotten. Imagine raising sons in a world where every other father is raising a predator. Knowing your boys will never have a friend who isn't dangerous, never marry into a family that hasn't been touched, never cross a market square without being the strangest people in it. Imagine speaking the truth, year after year, to crowds who look at you the way you would look at the last man alive, insisting the world is round. How would it feel to be the final carrier of something priceless, and to know that not one person around you can even see what you are holding? That is the weight Genesis hands to Noah in a single word: blameless. The last clean line, awake in a world that had gone entirely dark. There is something in this that almost no one stops to notice. We speak about Noah as one righteous man, but the verse and the genealogy together point at something far larger and stranger. A chain 10 generations long, every link of which had to hold for this one moment to be possible. If the line had snapped at any point, at the 3rd generation, at the 7th, at the 9th, there would have been no clean blood left to save, and the story of the world simply ends in the water. Everything that came after, every nation, every covenant, every person who has ever drawn breath since the flood, hung on 10 links of one thread staying unbroken, while the entire rest of the world was dragged into the dark. Grace did not rescue a good mood, it rescued a bloodline. And it rescued it by the narrowest margin imaginable, one strand still lit. So when heaven finally looked down and chose where to begin the world again, it did not choose the strongest, the wisest, or the most powerful. It chose the one place the enemy had never reached, and funneled the whole future of the human race down to a single uncontaminated line, and then onto a boat. And here is where this stops being ancient history and turns toward you. That thread did not end at the flood. It ran on, through Noah, through his sons, down through every generation between that water and this moment, until it reached the blood moving through your own body as you hear these words. You are downstream of the one line that held. The same thread of light that refused to go out in the darkest hour the world has ever known is, in a real and literal sense, still burning. And it runs through you. The question this story leaves in your hands is not whether the line survived. You are the proof that it did. The question is what you will do now that you know what it cost to hand it to you. If that pulls at something in you, follow history remembered. Because the deeper we dig into what was really happening before the flood, the clearer it becomes that the world we think we know was built on the survival of a single thread that very nearly went out. But the story does not end with the line that stayed clean, because the corruption Noah escaped had not been sitting idle. While his one thread held in the light, the darkness all around it had been busy, breeding, growing, feeding. It had already produced something that walked the earth in those final years on legs taller than the rooftops. Something that the texts say was always hungry. Subscribe to History Remembered, because next we go looking for what the corrupted world gave birth to, and we find out exactly what Noah's clean blood was running from.